All right, let's talk Seattle Seahawks. Look, this is a team, another winning season in the books. So one of the underrated, steady contributors in the National Football League. But it's clear they need to make some changes, some moves to push them over the top. And recently, there have been multiple reports from a bunch of different sources indicating the Seahawks could be making a massive trade of all things. Very interesting development in Seattle. But first, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the Seattle Seahawks team, obviously, they've had a lot of success in terms of just being above average, consistent, steady performer over the last few years. But the goal is to win Super Bowls, so changes need to happen. And there's been a bunch of reports that the Seattle Seahawks are shopping wide receiver DK Metcalf. Metcalf is reportedly finding himself on the trade block when you look at all the evidence and corroborate it from different sources. Let's pull up a couple of these reports involving two different teams that could be potential trade destinations for the receiver, and then we'll talk about what it means for the Seahawks on the other side. Let's pull up these both these reports here. All right, the first one is from Bolt Beat. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler has a potential idea for at least one of the star offensive names could come from this season. Talking with Chargers here. The NFL insider pegs Seattle Seahawks wideout DK Metcalf as a possible trade to the Chargers this coming season. Fowler is arguably the best insider reporter league wide at ESPN. He's been at it a long time, great source. So when he says, hey, the Chargers could trade for Seattle Seahawks wide receiver DK Metcalf, that means he thinks DK Metcalf is definitely available and he's got great sources. And that falls into the next report, according to Wisconsin Sports Heroics. The Green Bay Packers are considering a major trade to acquire Seattle Seahawks wide receiver DK Metcalf, a two-time Pro Bowler, following a disappointing playoff exit with star wide receiver Christian Watson sidelined at least until November 2025. The Packers' option in the passing game are limited. All right, so we got two different sources there about both two different teams inquiring to trade and for DK Metcalf, which means the Seattle Seahawks are likely shopping the wide receiver. Interesting development. I think there's actually a really solid reason why the Seahawks would make this move, and we'll talk about it over the next few minutes. But first, Seahawks fans, in the comment section below, what do you think of a hypothetical DK Metcalf trade? And look, I know it depends on what you get in return and things like that, but just in terms of just high level, what would you think of this trade? Would you be in for it? Would you be hateful of it? Would you really not care? Let us know what you think about this hypothetical DK Metcalf trade that seems more likely by the day. Let's hear it from it. Let's hear from you guys in the comment section below. But Miles, what are your thoughts on the specific details of this, DK Metcalf trade opportunity for Seattle?
Yeah, Nick, I think it makes a whole lot of sense. DK Metcalf is still a really solid player. His performance hasn't dipped, but you can see the writing on the wall as far as the changing of the guard in the lead wide receiver of this team. You can see it through the targets. You can see it through the receptions. Jackson Smith and Jigba is a star. The guy is growing. He's going to be a really good player. So you have an opportunity for the ultimate sell high on DK Metcalf. This guy's still in the prime of his career. He's got some good seasons left in him. Teams want him. You can see, we talk about it on the flip side of things. You can see Jeremy Fowler coming out and talking about teams that want to trade, or the Seahawks want to trade him. But also, you see a lot of reports for different teams that want DK Metcalf. So that shows there's both, demand and supply. He's available and people want him. So great opportunity for the Seahawks to go ahead and trade him. Because Jackson Smith and Jigba doing really good. He got 100 receptions this year to DK Metcalf 66. He's really starting to lead this team as far as the lead wide receiver. So I think now is the time to move. Now is the time to get off of DK Metcalf, ride Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he's the future wide receiver of this team. But DK Metcalf has still had enough great seasons under his belt that you can get a big haul for him. He is a quantity, that people want, a commodity, that people want. And I think this is a huge opportunity for the Seahawks to continue getting younger, moving for the future. You've got a team here with a lot of older receivers. Metcalf, he's got a few seasons under his belt. Lockett, he's really got a lot of seasons under his belt. And Jigba, he's younger, so get some value out of DK Metcalf. I think it's a perfect opportunity to move off of him and keep going with Jackson Smith and Jigba. It makes a whole lot of sense, and you can already see everyone in the league is probably going to bid a big bidding war over DK Metcalf.
Yeah, and look, when you look at the Seattle Seahawks cap situation, and look, cap situations are very fluid. There's a lot of leverage you can pull this time of year to move dollars around. Teams do it all the time. So when you hear these numbers, big grain of salt. But the reality is currently, according to overthecap.com, Seattle Seahawks sit 27 million bucks over the cap. Again, that's not really how bad their situation is because there's a lot of levers and restructures and cuts they're going to make. But the reality is they're going to have to make some moves. So the decision is, do you make a move in trading DK Metcalf, get a lot in return for the star wide receiver, while also freeing up at least $10.8 million in cap space? It just makes a lot of sense. And you talked about DK Metcalf's performance, the opportunity to buy or to sell high here, which of course you always want to do in any investment decision. If you look at PFF, his grades, you'll notice that this was, according to PFF now, his worst graded season since his rookie year 2019, and this was the lowest snap count he had since 2021. Right. So this is a guy, again, we're not seeing a big dip in performance, and his numbers are still good. His grades are still above average. He's still playing a lot of football, playing at a high level, but he's not quite at the elite level. He's starting what appears to be a slight downward trend, which means now would be the ideal time to move off of him. And smart organizations do this all the time. Bill Belichick, the New England Patriots, was famous for doing it. He'd have great players, sometimes future Hall of Fame players. They dip a little bit and he would ship them off to get something in return. And people would be like, he's still good. But then 2 years later, he fell off a cliff and that player stinks anymore. And Belichick would look great. The Chiefs do this sometimes as well. The Seahawks have done this a few times throughout the years, of course, under Pete Carroll and Schneider. They've done this a number of instances as well. It's what smart teams do, right? You don't want to stay on and hold on to a player a year or two late. You'd rather move off a year or two early. And look, I like DK Metcalf as a player. I think he's a physical phenom. He can be a guy that can flip a game on its head, whether it's big plays down the field, yards after catch. He can do incredible things that very few other receivers can do in the NFL. But the reality is there is something I call the one ball problem, right? You hear about this a lot more in basketball. There's only one football that can be thrown around. You don't want to have so many different playmaking options that you have good quality players that are underutilized, right? There's a reason why some teams don't have 4 first-round pick wide receivers. You can't throw the football enough to make it worth your while. You want Jackson Smith and Jigba to get his targets. You want to be more involved in the running game. That's what the Seahawks are trying to do. What does that mean? It means, do you pay DK Metcalf big money to get 60 catches in a season and have his targets continue to drop? I don't think it's worth it, right? At this point, I think it makes sense to trade a guy like Metcalf, get that cap relief, and use those assets you get in the trade to get a complimentary receiver for Jackson Smith and Jigba and fill some other holes on this roster. That would be the prudent thing to do, and it looks like that's what the Seattle Seahawks are planning to do, and it's a smart decision for the long-term trajectory of this franchise.